It's great to see you. My name is Daniel Grad. I'm the member of Visionaries in V and founder of MasterKey Software. At MasterKey, we specialize in development of custom software for logistics and transportation. And today, I would like to tell you more about my past visit in Nevada, in Las Vegas specifically, which took over a month. And basically, I would like to tell you more about what I've experienced and the conclusions which I've drawn from that visit. Hopefully, this is going to help you to either expand your business there, or if you're located in the States, to um, take advantage of the European, including Polish market. Um, the whole presentation is going to be split into three parts. First, I'll be talking about how you can create the value. Secondly, about this value could be sold to the customers from those markets. And in the end, I'll go briefly through other differences. Whenever you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand. I'll take a break as soon as I just finish my sentence, and you'll be free to ask your questions. I'll also let you ask the questions by the end of the presentation. Okay, so I'm sorry, what's going on? Yeah, creating the value. So it's worth to mention at the very beginning that the main difference between both of the markets is the degree of the development. That means that since US market is naturally more a capitalistic one, I think that's the word which to some may indicate some negative feelings, to others not. Frankly, the opposite. But that's definitely its nature. And then that also implies how the current market in the US functions. Typically, the companies which are advertised in the US often focus on a certain problem and offer a particular solution to the problem. Whether these are some products offered in a supermarket, whether these are ads in the radio, or whether you're just seeing a banner at the side of the road. In the Europe, the market unfortunately isn't as developed. Of course, it is pretty developed in the modern terms, but it's not as fluent in the freedom of providing services one to another. That means what I mean by saying that is that typically when you encounter a company in Europe, especially in Poland, which is catching up pretty well, but comparing to the US, it's still a bit behind in its development, as a company typically offers a service based on a certain skill set. So, for example, if we take a software development company, what has been frequently practiced up to several years ago until the Silicon Valley crisis took place. And basically, well, of course, it wasn't only because of that, but there were several factors which by the end of 2022 collapsed. Well, maybe not collapsed, but has caused a shrinking of whole the IT industry, which has been pretty much the biggest IT crisis which we have experienced in Poland, was that the companies were basically offering vague software development services. And the main value proposition was that they were simply cheaper. And they've been trying to offer pretty much to every customer of theirs that, well, hey guys, we could simply create an app for you. We can do mobile apps, we can do desktop apps, web apps, and so on and so on. So basically a skill set based, while they would often forget about the actual business, the actual problem resolution, what should stand behind every single stable business model. Of course, that doesn't mean that that's how every single European company functions, because there is a minority of those who operate in a much smarter manner. Um, the smarter approach often is present among the countries of so-called old Europe, mainly Germany. So, for example, a friend of mine who's a German entrepreneur has actually told me about this business model, which seems to be aligned very well with what's practiced generally in the US market, namely the bottlenecks focused business model, which is based on the theory of constraints, the model proposed by Wolfgang Mewes, which basically focuses on targeting a certain market area revolving around certain customer group and coming up with a solution which addresses that bottleneck in order to basically amplify how this business operates. But unfortunately, this is not widely practiced. This is definitely the direction which should be taken. That's something that is going to be beneficial if introduced to business models here. And I see that slowly, when companies are facing the crisis, they actually start to draw conclusions and implement that into their models. So yeah, unfortunately, what's still very present among those companies here in Europe is that they are scattering their value in a vague offer, basically like a shotgun approach, where a very simple business offer is enriched with other services. For example, a company which develops app may also offer the IT maintenance or website development because they're unable to get as a stable flow of customers as they would if their core business value, if they focus on their core business value. So one such example of a properly functioning company, which I've learned about in the US, is somebody whom I've met in the Henderson Chamber during my orientation days. I mean, during the Henderson Chamber orientation days for new members. It's somebody who, well, used to have a software company specializing in insurance companies. He used to develop it for quite some time. Then, after a couple of years, he had decided to basically sell it to retire early, but still his passion were cars. He simply loved cars. That was not only his hobby, that was an actual passion to which he devoted a significant part of his life. And as his retirement went on, he at some point he realized that, well, he's bored with his way of living, and he would like to establish another business. And his business model could be summarized very simply in the following words. He simply fixes alloy wheels. And this is it. Typically, in European companies which you encounter in the market, you can see plenty of car shops. You can see some mechanics offering their services as freelancers, sometimes some major companies which aggregate those services to create check stations. But you can rarely find a company which really orients its whole business around one particular pain point. And for that person, this particular pain point were shattered alloy wheels. So whenever somebody would just hit the curb, instead of looking for a particular car shop, making sure that they're actually able to solve it, making sure that actually the quality of services is sufficient, they just reach out to them, knowing that since that's what he specializes in, makes him the expert in the area, because if he's able to maintain the constant flow of customers, just providing a single type of a service, that means that the customers are really happy with his value proposition. And considering that that person Does this sole thing on a daily basis throughout the whole day means that he becomes a specialist in that area, which also is another, which also increases the value because then at a certain point he may become the market leader. So that makes him the natural top brand holder. Um, or another such example, which I've also heard I've learned about by listening to a radio while driving through Los Angeles, was unfortunately, I don't remember the name of this company, but basically that was a company which specializes. Their ad was basically such that if you need help with a motorcycle accident, just reach out to them. So that was basically a law firm which specialized in helping people involved in motorcycle accidents. So it wasn't just simply a law firm with a long history of various won cases. It wasn't just a law firm which specializes in commutation. It was a law firm which specialized in accidents involving motorcycles. So also the fact that they're dealing only with this particular thing implies that they must be really good at it and that they've got huge experience. So the chances of winning such case and maximizing your insurance payout just it just maximizes it. So this is what we should learn from the US market, that we should orient our businesses around solving a particular pain point about providing a solution to a problem, not just the mere services and hoping that somebody may get interested in them. Now, about the research and development. So yeah, actually, I've already partially covered that topic. And what also helps to, so yeah, about the research. So companies often need to update their offer to stay relevant to their customers' needs. So what typically happens in the European companies is that having a certain skill set, companies often try to just navigate around the customer's needs to figure out where the skill could be applied. So for example, if somebody knows how to set up the Facebook ads, they may try to offer that, well, we could create ads for you. If somebody is capable of creating applications, they try to sell that skill as, well, we could automate stuff for you guys. And if somebody has sales experience, they could offer basically their skill as sales service, while focusing on, well, in the US, knowing what I've already mentioned also made me realize that the way to research the market is also a bit different. So instead of trying to find the application of the skills, you take into consideration the whole flow, the whole process, because since what they offer is a solution to an actual problem, and they monetize this solution already, then how you could contribute to this solution is to enhance the performance of that particular solution. So for example, if a company is, let's say, a transportation company, a trucking company, which offers transporting goods from point A to point B, then to improve its business model, which solves the problem of moving the goods from point A to point B. One approach could be to reduce the fuel consumption or the scheduling part by, for example, creating a software which does it automatically. So basically, my point is that by analyzing first the whole process, underlying process of underlying business model of certain company, it's better, it's natural to come up with solutions which targets the steps of that whole core process. Because improving a certain step in the whole process improves the customer's incomes, and in turn, it's you could just quote them as a part of the saved incomes. Um, so when talking about yeah, so we can seamlessly move on to the next part, which is selling. By the way, do you have any questions so far? Okay, I take that for no. So, considering what I just said about creating the value proposition, we can seamlessly move on to selling because that also revolves around the value itself. So, when taking into consideration that, if somebody creates their business model in this American way, it's also easier to then basically sell the solution because knowing who specifically benefits from your solution already lets you know your customer persona, and it simply just stems out of the business model, and it already takes partially takes care of the sales process. Now, how people typically sell. In general, in the US, people really like to talk. Like you've definitely heard plenty of times, either yourself on some, I don't know, either in person, on YouTube videos, maybe movies. The typical phrase, greeting face, when somebody meets somebody else and they just openly ask, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, how you doing?" And on one hand, this is just a form of greeting, but very often this may lead to an actual conversation. Of course, only if the conversation is beneficial to both parties, because well, this could also be used as a way of just forcing somebody's opinion on somebody else, and that's just what people would rather avoid doing. But in general, it's very easy to start a conversation. Americans in general are very nice. Um, Somebody who has never had any interaction with them may draw various conclusions just based on some movies, but in reality, I would compare their hospitality to the hospitality of Greeks, maybe Italians in Europe. So like their care for others is really genuine. Of course, it may be not very deep to such something like we experience sometimes expect in Poland that somebody else needs to be completely taken care of. But at the same time, I don't think that being somebody else's nanny is actually a good thing. So in general, they do care about others, and they care about others much more than people do in Europe. That's at least the impression I got. Um, Also, it's worth to mention that people's tempers and their culture also differs across various states. So I'll get back to that by the end of this part. But for now, I would like to tell you more about how people communicate in general. So yeah, since they really like to talk and learn new people, there's plenty of opportunities in most of the cities to expand your social network. In cities, especially in cities like Las Vegas, there are plenty of expos. There are pretty much expo shows at least a couple times a week, sometimes every single day. There are plenty of conventions where the specialists could um, create new bonds, can exchange the knowledge. There are also local chamber events, like for example, Vegas Chamber or Henderson Chamber events, where people also join to stimulate the growth of their own businesses and to help others grow as well, to stimulate local economy, as well as there are other networking events. So, for example, something really popular which has grown very recently is I don't know whether should call it a social platform, maybe like a networking platform. Either way, no matter how we label it, it's a platform called Alignable. Alignable is pretty much, shortly speaking, like a LinkedIn, which targets only North American citizens, and is focused around networking in real life to make those connections genuine, not to rely on basically fake and automated approaches like the ones at LinkedIn. It's actually meant to foster the relationships which have reflection in the reality. Because of the nature of that platform, of course, that's rather targeted to smaller and mid-sized companies. But still, that emphasizes how a huge role in their lives networking with others really play. Um, Cold calling. Actually, the idea of cold calling comes from the US, and although in recent years it's been slowing down, by slowing down meaning that the role of sales development representatives has improved, and basically number of those roles across the whole world have improved as well. Some people have become a bit reluctant to answering phones from unknown numbers, but it's still doing pretty well. Just on my own example, across just a couple of such cold calls, I managed to schedule two meetings with people who were with locals who were interested. By locals, I mean Americans who were interested in my product. One of those people, one of them was a Vegas local. The other one was from Texas. So that also it gives some hint of the general culture, because although both are southern states, they actually kind of differ a bit. So somebody who just hears that suggestion may initially think that, well, the states happen to be different. But apparently, according to my experience, little, although still some experience, they are pretty positive. As long, of course, as what you're proposing provides a value to them, because that's also another thing that they're pretty straightforward when it comes to evaluating the value which they may receive. Uh, on the other hand, in Europe, people are not so used to cold calling. So, for example, recently I've started a cold calling campaign targeting some Dutch companies, and a frequent response, like I would say every third response which I would get, is that, well, I'm not Dutch, so they're not interested in talking with me. So unfortunately, I'm not sure whether that's their typical call, whether they've used that as an excuse not to continue the conversation with me, or whether the actual cultural barrier was had a meaning there. But well, apparently, since the US is much more united culturally, and culturally, in this case, I mean being a single nation, using the same language, while in Europe, well, we use pretty much every single country uses a different language. Every single country has its own a bit specific culture, so even those cold calls need to be adjusted to the culture. Apparently, that's not so easy to overcome. I mean, it imposes a certain burden, which makes the business a bit harder. So so definitely, um, cold calling is something that really well works really well in the US still nowadays. Luckily, in Poland, it's been a bit better comparing to the Western market, the Western European market. In Poland, companies are much open to fostering new connections, new um, getting in touch with new people. So as long as there is value, they're pretty open. And this way, I've also managed to establish some connections, which may result soon in new companies. So people are not only keen on joining sales related calls, but also cold calls, which try to establish, for example, some innovation. And yeah, and the differences between the states. So I've already mentioned that some states have their specific culture, and those may differ across different states. So one of the most common differences is that West Coast is known to be very chilled out area, and on the contrary, East Coast is the one where the people typically are very strict to being on time to the meetings or being dressed really professionally, really formally. Um, or, for example, when it comes to such differences between very particular states. So Nevada is a great example of state, as you may have already learned that from Rafael Kartaszyński, that Nevada is a very great place to start your business because considering that Las Vegas is a pretty young city, which has been established like 70, 80 years ago. And nowadays, more than 70% of the population are not Nevada born. They are the people who have moved there. And they've moved for a particular reason. They've moved because they have noticed that there is a business opportunity there, that there's a certain demand for certain employees. Um, they are actually the kind of people which you meet in, especially in Las Vegas, is the very hardworking people who are very open to others, who are very willing to either get to know each other or to establish new businesses. I'm saying that because I've also met a couple of people who have told me about their experiences from other states. So, for example, unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but at one of the chamber events, I met a person who moved from, I think it was Milwaukee or Minnesota. I don't remember, but in general, the area of the Great Lakes. Moved to California and tried to establish his own business over there. And unfortunately, after several years, he had to close it down because, well, he just couldn't establish as stable source of customers as other companies with a similar profile. I haven't analyzed his business model too well, so I can't say whether it was really the problem of the business model or just the local culture. But according to what I've learned from him, many customers wouldn't use his services because he simply wasn't local, meaning he wasn't born in California. So certain and similar, I've heard also similar thing about Texas. So I've heard a story about that was actually a Polish entrepreneur who wanted to expand his software agency to Dallas. He had spent around 1.5 years in Texas, and unfortunately, he didn't manage to get even a single customer because he wasn't Texan. So apparently, I mean that those informations are not statistically significant, but still there are some examples of cases where people were not as accepted as people typically are in Las Vegas. Overall, trust is very important in states. So some states are more open to newcomers, some are much more closed. but ultimately it's a very trust and relationship oriented business. So it's important to at least every now and then to hang around some events closely related to your type of business, your type of presence, like for example the chamber events. And it's important to basically foster the relationships with locals and to make sure that your business is not only about just making money, but it's also about helping others, because that's the foundation of all the trust. Um, if they feel like you're helping them, they're very keen on recommending you further and making sure that not only others benefit from your services, but also that you benefit from others just paying you. Um, yeah, so I think we could proceed to the last part, which is the other differences. I've covered many of those areas in my previous parts already, but just to summarize, I mean, and then just to add a couple of new thoughts. Um, because of the very capitalistic nature of the US, there is little social support, but this fosters the relationships between the locals, because considering that because having in mind that the government is not going to help them in a case of some emergency, they heavily rely on the support of their friends. Hence, such platforms like um, well, I don't remember any of the names, but like the Polish equivalents are like zrutka.pl, etc. Basically, the ones where people just contribute with their funds to help others. Such kind of platforms work really well, or people are very keen on just organizing an event just like that in order to raise funds for somebody in need, or even just to strengthen like the bonds of the local neighborhood. So I think that actually this distance, which you see, so on one hand, it's more the society is much more distant because there's just much more space. People are living in their own houses instead of apartments. But at the same time, having this distance lets them crave um, to hang out with others, and having no foundation to rely on in case of an emergency also makes them strengthen the friendships, basically to receive support from their friends. Um, yeah, actually, the matters which I wanted to mention, the remaining points, I have already discussed I have already referred to in the previous points. So yeah, that would be pretty much it when it comes to this third part. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Yes, we have one from the Q&A. In terms of cultivating a business relationship, did you find it easier to connect over cold calling or mail/LinkedIn? Which form of outreach did you find most receptive?
Hard to say because I haven't done much LinkedIn outreach. I'm not doing that nowadays anymore because, well, I just don't think that LinkedIn is really reliable anymore, at least not to the degree which it used to be. I mean, of course, it's still a great tool as a supportive medium, but I haven't done much in terms of reaching out to Americans across LinkedIn, at least not after I have joined the Visionaries in V. So it's also hard to, I mean, The results would definitely be different when comparing some random person from just from Europe and a person who actually lives there and tries to establish relationships which will have reflection in the reality, but they're using LinkedIn just to initiate it. But yeah, to answer your question, there is value in cold calling, but I can't really say much about LinkedIn on its own.
Uh, Thank you. A very informative session.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or can we close off?
Actually, I have one question because I don't know, Daniel, if it was your first time this year to visit Las Vegas or you already have been there.
No, it was my first time ever.
And what are your thoughts about these like networking events? Like, was it hard to find your place, to meet new people, or how was it?
No, not at all. They're actually very welcoming. So I'm not sure whether it's just an American thing or whether it's something very specific to Las Vegas, but they're very open. And actually, I'm glad that you've asked the question because I forgot to mention that, and it's actually I think it's going to be a valuable insight that I actually met a couple of people on those events with whom I just had a brief conversation, like 10, 15 minutes conversation, just talking about some random stuff, then about some business as well. And those people, knowing that I had um, certain business needs, that I wanted to reach out to certain people, that I wanted to um, learn more about certain business models of certain companies. These people not only led me to be connected with those people with whom I wanted to reach out to, but also they spend their own time. They actually decided to just offer an additional in-person meeting where we would just spend like an hour or two just talking in person just to foster the relationship with me. So it wasn't like some superficial. Those weren't some superficial conversations. These people actually wanted to get to know me, and they've actually spent their own time hanging out with me as if we were friends. So that's something I haven't experienced anywhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you for your attendance and attention. If you happen to have any further questions later on, just feel free to reach out to me. I'll happily answer all of them.
Thank you. And once again, thank you for joining us and for this informative session.
Thank you. Have a nice evening and a day.